you're wondering what is this that you're watching, I call this my daily code vlog. It's about code, kind of like a vlog. It's a clog. Today I want to talk about testing interactions in React components. So I have this component here where if you open the menu with this button, you can hover things and nothing is really selected for you when you open it. So if you hit enter or space or the down arrow, the first element is selected. But if you hit the up arrow, the last element is selected because you're kind of starting from the bottom, looping up. This is what we want to test. So the component works. I have a hook for this called use menu initial focus hook. I know, very descriptive. And to test this out, I created this test component as like a fixture. So I'm using React testing library, and with that, I want a good component that I can render. So I've stripped out all of the menu things so that I can only focus on this hook. And I have a button which opens the container. And when this container is open, it has a few things. It has a few spans that are obviously not focusable, but I have these buttons in between, which are actually things that can have focus. And the hook returns a container ref and a function that you pass the key down. So I've cooked all of that up. All right, to begin, I'm going to render the component first. I'm going to say render my test component. And then when it renders, React testing library gives you a bunch of helper utilities. So the one that I'm going for is called get by text. So the idea is that I want to get an element using just the text. So instead of attaching IDs or references on this button, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to grab it by the text. And the idea is that this is what the user would do. They wouldn't look at IDs, they would just click by looking at the text. Get by text, and here's my button. And then once I have the button, I'm going to fire a keyboard interaction on it. So there's a helper for that as well. It's called fire event. I can call fire event dot key down, pass it the button, and then I can give a bunch of options. So in this case, the option that I want is what's the key that was pressed. And now what I want is to check what is in focus. So let's grab the first button because pressing enter, so the first button should be focused. I'm going to grab this button. So first button is again get by text, getting the first focusable element. And now there are multiple ways of doing this. The way that I like to do this is say expect first button to be the active element. And this is really interesting. So you might not know this, but you can grab whatever is in focus right now in the browser by going to document.activeElement. This variable is always updated with whatever is in focus. So now this kind of looks good. Let me just run it real quick. And you can see that the HTML body is actually in focus. And this happens when you don't really have anything in focus. The focus fallbacks to the body, document.body. And so something went wrong here. Let's check out the hook. So what's happening is actually we use a set timeout and we use this for some reasons. But the thing that you need to know is that if your component does something async, then your test doesn't run async. It doesn't wait for that event to happen. So you might not actually catch it. There are multiple ways of doing this. So if you're just testing the hook, there's a different way. If you're testing the component, which I am, first of all, let's create this test as async. Let's make it async. And now I'm going to wrap these two lines in a await wait for. Now wait for is again a utility by React testing library, and it basically waits for the moment when this is true, and it has a timeout. So if it times out and this didn't happen in the next tick, then they're kind of done. So I'm going to run the test again, and it's going to run. It's going to look for that test. There you go. So now that we know our test works, what I want to do is not just test it with enter, but test it with all of the options. So I'm going to copy this code, paste it, and just replace enter with space because I know that's the other test. Add another one for arrow down. Oops. All right, finally, let's add a test for arrow up because that's the interesting one. It should focus the last element. I'm just going to copy the test for arrow down, change it to arrow up, and change this to focus the last element, last button. And in our fixture, we had first button, second button, third button. So we want the third button to get the focus. Perfect. This looks good. I'm just going to run my tests, and we should have four nicely pretty green tests here. The final thing that I want to add here is the click. So even though we don't even use the hook with the click event, but I just want to add this test as a regression test so that we don't end up introducing a bug in the future. And I just want to change a few things here. So it should not focus any elements when opened with a click. And so now we're going to change the fire event to a click. And now this is where it gets interesting because we're waiting for something that wouldn't really happen, right? So we could maybe test, does the first button, and if I say it should not be equal, then we should have a passing test. So this is good, but it's not really very useful. I think what we should test for is it doesn't focus the first one, doesn't focus the last one, and where does the focus go? So I'm just going to copy this again, make it last button, and finally let me add where should the focus be. So I'm doing a expect document.body to be the active element. And as I said, when no element has focus, focus falls all the way up to the body of the document. So that's what we're going to test. Final time, let's run this test. Let's hope everything works. And it does. Perfect. So we have 5 passing tests. I'm happy with this. I'm going to push this and signing out. Bye.